There are literally hundreds of thousands of books out there written for Christians to help them in every aspect of their life and their faith journey. Today, I'm going to tell you the 10 best ever written, right here, right now. Hi, welcome to the channel. My name is Dan Beesley, and this channel is all about inspiring intentional discipleship, helping us through learning and teaching to become more intentional disciples of Christ. And not only that, but to share our faith and our great hope with others. Please subscribe for future episodes, because I'm going to be looking at different themes and different topics from different points of view. So yesterday I recorded exactly the top 10, but I expanded and it's more in depth. It's a long video. So click the link now if you want to see that one. But today I'm just going to go overview of the top 10 really quickly. And number 10 is Paradise Lost by John Milton, written in the 1600s. John Milton actually wrote this when he was blind. It's all about Genesis 3 and the fall of man and the whole story about what's happening. It's fictional, but it draws out all the things that are going on so people can understand the story better. It's a classic and it's still around today and it's still relevant. Really great to teach on the fall. And number 9 is The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. He is the father of the Italian language. And this is a classic, not just in the Christian world, but worldwide. This is held up as an amazing piece of work. And this follows a journey through hell into heaven and all that goes on. It was never intended to be anything other than a story, but it's found its place and it's really amazing, and it draws out lots of themes of heaven and hell. A real classic you should read. And number 8 is Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton, a prolific English Catholic writer, wrote so much. He basically sums up the Apostles' Creed, how we can make sense of it in the world today and what we can actually do about it. He puts it into context. It's a really challenging and encouraging book and is so relevant for people today. And number 7, Sinners in the Hand of an Angry God by Johnathan Edwards. This is actually a sermon that was preached in North America and sparked a revival, the Great Awakening. It touches so many things and it speaks truth. It explains that hell is real. It explains that God really does hate sin and there is a wrath against it. And it explains that Jesus Christ is the only way of salvation. This was preached and it sparked a revival. So you should just read it for seeing what he said. So applies today, but we don't preach like that. And number 6 is The Life and Diary of Johnathan Brainerd by Johnathan Edwards again, but he didn't write this. Johnathan Brainerd did. Johnathan Edwards just edited and put it together. David Brainerd was a missionary to the North American Indians, and he wrote a diary of his experiences. He was so passionate about preaching and sharing Christ in the most dangerous of circumstances. John Wesley recommended that all preachers should read this book because it's so inspirational, and this book has set off so many missionaries out there. A definite read if you're preaching or into evangelism. Number 5, The Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer fought against the Nazi regime, was imprisoned and ultimately paid his life. He writes in this book that the discipleship has got a cost, that the church back then and even today throws out this cheap grace, but discipleship has a cost, and that Christians not hide from the world but need to engage in the world. We only have to look at his life as a great example at that. But it's a really challenging book and will speak today as much as it did in a terrible situation that he was in. And number 4, Knowing God by J.I. Packer. This is an amazing book that looks at the character of God. It looks at such things like his identity, his wisdom, his love and his grace. This book is written in a way that is really accessible in language, really easily readable on such a complex subject as the character of God. It's a relatively recent book, but for a modern book it's been around and it has become a classic in a real short time. If you want to understand who God really is, this is the book to go to. Number 3 is Confessions by Augustine, a really influential Christian writer and thinker from the early church. This is a spiritual autobiography talking about how from a rebellious teenager he became a Christian and then a devout pastor. It's really relevant today because in him talking about his battling against his own sin, it brings out our sin and how we battle against that, and seeing him overcome it, it will help us overcome ours and how we can walk further in our journey with Christ. And number 2 is Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, the author of the Narnia Chronicles, and really well known for that. This is a book that's really accessible, really easy to read. He doesn't hide away from any controversial issues that were there at the time that he wrote, not the controversial issues of today. He doesn't hide away from, like I said, tackling anything. He speaks about the whole of the universe. He speaks about the Christian faith, doctrine by doctrine, really going into detail on some, like the Trinity. But he does it in such a way that it's easily accessible and easy to read, and that's why it's become such a classic, and for Christians and non-Christians alike. And now the number one book, and this is a real classic, and it will always be The Pilgrims Progress by John Bunyan. Bunyan was a nonconformist in a time when the Church of England, being Anglican after being Catholic, was setting down its roots. And being a nonconformist, he was put in prison for 10 years. In prison, he had a lot of time to thinking, and he really developed some ideas of his about Christianity, which come out in his works, and this is one. This book follows the character Christian from where he lives in the city of destruction on his journey to the celestial city, and all the things that happen and the people that he meets along the way. And it really does speak about the Christian journey, and right in there is the encounter with the cross, and it's so important. And it's so important that the cross isn't at the end. This is a story with a real deep spiritual meaning, and really amazing. This isn't the definitive list, this is a list. This is a list of the top 10 classic books. There are many more. Which ones would you put in? Put in the comments below.